Welcome back to Pre-Market Prep. I'm Spencer Israel, and I'm joined now by Brad Loncar of Loncar Investments. Brad is a biotech expert based in Kansas City. Brad, how are you doing this morning?
Good morning. Happy holidays. Thanks for having me.
You too. You were on the show about a month or two ago. I want to give you another chance, though, to kind of give your background for some of our listeners who may not have heard.
Sure. I'm a biotech investor. I run a small family office here in Kansas City, and I've been doing that full time for about 7 or 8 years and part time for most of my life. And I love biotech. I think this is the most exciting and rewarding sector to invest in. And so I've made it my focus.
You know what's funny? It seems like a lot of people, the people who are into biotech, are really into biotech.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the most exciting sector to invest in. Every company has an interesting story, and also it has a social good. I think it's a very noble thing to invest in. I mean, these are companies that are trying to develop medicines to benefit patients and society, and so it's a very rewarding thing to invest in when things go well.
Now, you just announced a new partnership with the Cancer Research Institute. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I created an index this year called the Cancer Immunotherapy Index. There's a group of
That's
companies that are
CNCR,
developed.
correct? That's
That's
CNCR.
right. So there are a group.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a group of companies that are developing cancer treatments that harness the immune system. It's a new wave and a really interesting way of treating cancer that I think is really going to change the field over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. And there's a charity in New York called the Cancer Research Institute that has been working on this and funding private research in this immunotherapy area since the 1950s, which is amazing because, we're seeing these breakthroughs today and most people are just learning about immunotherapy for the first time, but people have been working on it for decades. And while we're supporting the public companies that are bringing these medicines to the market today, I think it's also important to support that basic research because you have to keep that going if you want to see breakthroughs in future decades. Just like the research from previous decades has created these breakthroughs we're seeing today. You have to keep it going, and so I've signed a partnership with this charity, and I'll be donating some of the royalties from my index to them over time to support their efforts to keep that research going.
Can you talk a little bit about your index, CNCR?
Sure. So the way the index is constructed, as I mentioned, these companies develop treatments that harness the immune system to fight cancer, and I've have a target of 30 companies, and we've broken it up into two categories. The first is the large pharmaceutical companies that are bringing these medicines to the market today. So that's like your Bristol Myers and your Merck. Those two companies have drugs called Opdivo and Keytruda. So we have 7 of those big guys who are bringing the medicines to market today, and then 23 of what you'd more classically consider your biotech companies who are working on second and third generation immunotherapies that hopefully we'll see reach the market in the coming years.
All right, now I wanted to get to some individual issues with you on biotech, and I want to start with Relipsa. They are moving a lot this morning, of course. The subject of M&A chatter in recent weeks. Benzinga reported that Merck is not involved with the bid, that Sanofi was a natural buyer. What are you seeing in Relipsa?
Yeah, so Relipsa is definitely a huge focus of biotech investors these days. It's moving this morning because Wedbush had a pretty bullish report out and increased their price target, I think, to 86. So this is a company that developed a drug for what's called hyperkalemia, which is when you have too much potassium in your blood.
Okay.
And in October, they received the first FDA approval for a hyperkalemia drug in over 50 years. So it's been a big unmet medical need. But when they received that approval, they received what's called a black box warning on their drug label, which essentially kind of restricts how the drug can be dosed. And so a lot of people were disappointed by that, and the stock kind of crashed. But I think as time has gone on and people have thought more about this specific restriction and talked to doctors and key opinion leaders, they maybe don't think it's so bad. And there's a competitor called ZS Pharma that AstraZeneca bought for $2.7 billion, and Relipsa is worth less than half of that. So they're just launching their drug now, and the competitor decision in front of the FDA won't be until May. And so Relipsa has a very important 4 or 5 months coming up where they'll be able to market this drug and kind of prove whether that dosing limitation is going to crimp sales or not. And if they do a good job of selling it over that time, their first market and could really be a leader. And so that valuation gap between the competitor and Relipsa might narrow a little bit. So a lot of people are focused on that stock right now.
What about BioMarine Pharmaceuticals? We know that they crashed at the end in November. Wedbush, I believe, offered a bullish report on them at the beginning of the month. This month, what are you seeing in BMRN?
Yeah, so I'll group that one together with another stock called Sarepta, because both BioMarin and Sarepta are developing drugs for a rare disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And BioMarin was the first to go in front of the FDA with their drug. They had what's called a panel meeting around Thanksgiving time, and it didn't go well at all. There's a lot of side effect issues with their drug. And it was scheduled to for the FDA decision to happen on December 27th. And the FDA said they needed a little more time and probably would make a final decision around early January. And, whenever the FDA asks for more time or changes their plan on something, everybody obsesses about is it good news, bad news. And the truth is you don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see which of either BioMarin or Sarepta or both get approved. So the BioMarin decision is in early January, and then Sarepta has what's called a panel meeting on January 22nd. And so this whole Duchenne muscular dystrophy thing is something that is probably the number one focus of biotech right now. It's an interesting story that we've all been following for years, and it's kind of coming to a culmination right now. And this is a terrible disease, and these kids and these families don't have anything right now. So a lot of people are pulling for them, to have something. And so we'll see what the FDA decides here. It's going to be a very key issue for biotech.
I do also want to ask you about tickers QURE, Unicure. Also, if you are in the chat, you have any tickers you want Brad take a look at, pop them in. We'll see if he can do a quick look. But right now, I'm going to ask you about Unicure.
Yeah, Unicure is interesting. Frankly, probably one of the most disappointing technologies this year in biotech in terms of how the clinical data has looked has been what's called gene therapy. And Unicure is a gene therapy company. And they have some really important data coming up in early January. They're going to release data on 2 hemophilia B patients. And this is a company, last month, their chief business officer, who'd been at the company for 9 years, left. And then this week, or I guess late last week, the CEO left. They just had a CEO replacement. And so everybody's kind of pulling their hair out saying, well, gosh, if all these people are leaving the company, then it must be, terrible data coming up. But, of course, you talk to them and, they'll give you an explanation that, these new people are here to, take the company to the next level. And so, New information in biotech is very asymmetrical. The companies have all of the info and they know exactly what's going on, and we investors unfortunately know nothing. And so, whenever you see things like the FDA changing decision date, like I mentioned earlier, or in this case leadership turnover, it's impossible to know for sure whether it's good news or bad news. And when it happens in Unicure's case, right before a key data release, it just, there's so many questions arise. So that's going to be an interesting one and kind of a stressful one for a lot of people, because the whole gene therapy sector has gone through a huge bull-bear debate lately, as some data hasn't looked so hot. And so I think the bulls, and I would put myself in that category, are really pulling for, hopefully some good data. But gosh, that leadership turnover is something to really wonder about.
What about Clovis, CLVS? I think they were upgraded last week, maybe, by, looks like Janae may have upgraded Clovis. What's your take on Clovis?
Yeah, so I'm very skeptical of Clovis myself. They basically dropped the bomb on the market a few weeks ago. They had a drug, and the initial data that they released looked terrific. And it turns out, as they've discussed it with the FDA, and when they provided the FDA with new data, it didn't look so terrific. And so this is another case where investors don't know how long they had known about the bad news before they kind of, dropped it on the market. And their management team, which until this happened had been one of the most credible and most respected teams in all of biotech, is now like quite the opposite. The way they handled this new data was just terrible. And so now the FDA has extended the review of this particular drug where this happened, and there's already a competitor drug, AstraZeneca, who would have been a tough competitor to begin with. Now looks like their drug is much better anyway. So there's a lot of problems at Clovis, and there's they're in what we call the penalty box. Until they kind of redeem themselves, that stock is always going to kind of be in the doghouse when it comes to multiples and how investors view them. So I'm very cautious when it comes to Clovis.
Brad, I would love to keep talking to you. I have more questions I want to ask, but unfortunately we are running up against a bit of a wall here, so I have to let you go, but I will have you back soon, I promise. We've been talking to Brad Loncar of Loncar Investing. Brad, great to have you on as always, and like I said, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right.